what to expect from being a live-in nanny, and the pros and cons. Stay tuned. Hey everyone, it's Holly. If you are new to my channel, welcome. I do a lot of cooking, travel, homeschooling, and motherhood videos. And today I am talking about being a live-in nanny and the pros and cons that go along with it. What do I know about being a live-in nanny? Well, back in the day, before I was married with kids, I was a live-in nanny for about 7 years. I have had all kinds of experience living with different family, watching different types of kids. I wanted to share with you out there my experience and things to consider if you are thinking about being a live-in nanny someday. I am sharing this video for anyone out there, but I also want to reach out to those young gals out there that are maybe still in high school and thinking about what they want to do after they graduate. Say you're a junior or senior in high school thinking, I don't want to go to college either right away or ever. Maybe you want to take a gap year and you are looking for something to do right after you are done with high school. And being a live-in nanny is something to keep in mind, especially if you enjoy working with kids. Now, if you don't enjoy working with kids, I'm already going to say it's probably not a good fit to get into being a nanny at all. Let me just go ahead and say that before I get into anything else. You got to enjoy working with kids if you at all are considering being a nanny. Now, before I get into the pros and cons of being a live-in nanny, let me just share a quick story of how I got into being a live-in nanny and why I got into doing it. Back in the day when I was a junior in high school, I was thinking the same thing. I don't know what I want to do right after high school. I did want to go to college eventually, but at that time, I didn't know anything about even where I wanted to go to college, what I wanted to major in, and especially, I really wasn't interested in going to college right away. I really wanted to have some time in between. I really wanted to travel. And so when I found out about this opportunity to be a live-in nanny, I got really excited. Now, how did I find out about even being a live-in nanny? Well, my mom had a friend back then whose daughter had been a live-in nanny. Her daughter was, I don't know, maybe 7 or 8 years older than me, and she had been working as a live-in nanny for several years. My mom was talking to this friend about her daughter, and then it got back to me about what her daughter was doing, and I got real excited about the idea. I didn't even know really what it was, but I ended up getting together with my mom's friend's daughter, who was still currently working as a nanny. And then I had her tell me all about it and what to expect, kind of what I'm sharing in this video right now. And I was asking her everything that she could share about it and give me a better understanding, so I knew it was what I wanted to do. And after talking with her, I definitely knew it was what I wanted to do. Now, I'm not saying she shared all the negative, the cons and all that with me back then, but she shared with me enough that got me excited. And so I couldn't wait to finish high school, to start working as a live-in nanny. There were so many reasons why I was interested in doing it. One, I loved working with kids, and two, I really wanted an opportunity to move and live in different parts of the country, different parts of the world. And then, of course, it would be a job. It would be something for me to do while I tried to figure out what I wanted to do next. Once I knew this is what I wanted to do right out of high school, I started finding ways that I could prepare for doing this. And that meant for me getting a lot of experience with working with kids. Now, I had done a lot of babysitting already at that point, but I knew I needed more. The beginning of my senior year, I went and got a job at a preschool/daycare and worked as a preschool teacher that entire school year. It was a great opportunity for me to get all that experience working with kids so I can have things to put on my resume, and I could have letters of recommendation from the people I worked with. So that was definitely a great way for me to prepare. Now, as far as how I got started doing it, back in the day when I was a senior in high school, we didn't have the internet. Well, it was around, but it was not that big. And so there was not all these websites and all these different ways of finding jobs. But I did ironically come across an advertisement for a nanny agency in Connecticut. I grew up in Arizona. I'm living in Arizona, and I find out about a nanny agency in Connecticut looking for live-in nannies. And I thought, how fun is that? I would love to move to Connecticut. I had never been there. I had never been even north of New York State. Just being able to go to that part of the country and live in that part of the country was so exciting for me. Needless to say, I applied to that agency and nowhere else, and I had high hopes that I was going to be moving to Connecticut. I was hoping right after I graduated I'd get right into doing it, but I wasn't 18 yet and it was hard for me to find my first job. I did have to wait until I turned 18, and then I started getting some job opportunities come my way, and I was able to start my first live-in nanny job in Connecticut. And that's how I got my foot in the door. After that, I lived in several states working as a live-in nanny. I did a year in Connecticut in the Greenwich area, and then I did 5 years in California. I worked for a family there for a year, and then I worked for a family for 4 years in a row. Yes, it was the longest job I had. It was a great fit, and there was just a lot of reasons for me to stay in California at the time. Then I had also done some live-in nanny work in Charlotte, North Carolina, and then of course in Colorado, where I currently live now. So you can see that it gave me a lot of opportunities to move around, live in different parts of the country. I had always had high hopes that I might be able to live overseas for a year, but that never happened with nanny work. But it still could have been an option if I would have stayed with it. Definitely, I had some great experiences. Now I want to get into the pros and cons of being a live-in nanny. Thanks for bearing with me with my short story that kind of ended up being a long story. Okay, the pros of being a live-in nanny. Now, the first pro, it is not only a job, but it is a place to live. Like I said, I was able to move to all these different places. So when I moved to a place, I never had to then find a place to live. You know, a lot of times when people get a new job in a new state, they have to then go and find a place. No, you can move there, start your job, and you already have a place established to live. And on top of that, you save so much money. You do not have to pay for rent or all your utilities or your food. Room and board are always included as a live-in nanny. Sometimes a car is provided for a nanny. Many jobs I had, there was a dedicated car for a nanny. Most of the time it was 7 days a week. And then there was a few jobs I had where it was only 5 days a week. And then I used my own car on the weekends. That can always be a possibility for you not to even own your own car because they will provide you with one. And on top of that, they're also going to be paying for auto insurance, and then they're going to be paying for gas, at least all the gas for driving the kids around. But sometimes my nanny jobs pay for all the gas, and I never had to once pay for gas, even on the weekends. Sometimes they'll pay for health insurance. Really, you have no expenses. You have all your expenses paid for. On top of that, you get a paycheck. Talk about a great way to save money. I was able to save up so much money when I worked as a live-in nanny. It is a great way if you do want to go to college, but you want to save up for it. Or it's a great way for after college and you have all these college loans that you need to pay off. Any young person out there who has never moved out of their parents' house has no idea how expensive the cost of living is. And I have lived on my own outside of being a live-in nanny. I have lived, in apartments and had roommates, things like that. So I understand how much it does cost when you have to pay for all those expenses. It can be really hard to save money. A lot of people are living paycheck to paycheck. It is really hard to save up these days. That is definitely a great pro with being a live-in nanny, is you can save so much money. You have a place to live, you can save money. The next pro is going to be all the opportunities that you can get with your job. I was hoping when I got into being a live-in nanny, I was going to have all kinds of opportunities to travel. I thought I would be traveling to all these cool destinations with the families I worked for. And that does happen a lot with families. Will take their nannies on trips. I have heard of people who have taken their nannies on cool trips to like Hawaii, Disney World, cruises, Europe. That never happened with me. I actually never ended up with a family that did really cool trips that took me with them. I'll get into that in a minute. I did go on a ski vacation once with a family, and that was really cool. I went with them. I had my own room and bathroom, and I only watched the kids for really a couple hours in the morning while the parents went skiing. But then I had the rest of the day off and I was able to go skiing, and the parents paid for everything. They paid for the rentals, they paid for the lift tickets. So it was a free ski vacation for me. But of course, I did have to work a couple hours. Parents do like taking the nannies on trips, so that way they can have a babysitter, someone there, so maybe they can have a date night, they can go out and do something, or maybe an extra pair of hands, especially if they have those real little ones where they just need that extra hand while they are on vacation. But for the most part, the parents really want to spend time with the kids on vacation. So my experience, at least going on the ski trip, and other nannies that I knew in the past, when they've gone on vacations, their hours were very little. They just helped out a bit, like I said, for a date night, or so the parents can just get a little break or go do an activity together. But it would not be really long hours if they went on vacation with the family. But like I said, I did not have that experience that I thought I would. However, the cool thing was the families that I worked for did a lot of vacations. And when they did these vacations, I got time off, paid time off, and I went and did my own vacation. This one family I worked for did so many trips, and I would get usually a week, maybe a week and a half. One time they went to Europe for 2 weeks. And so I had 2 weeks off. And what do you think I did? I went on my own trip. I also went to another part of Europe, and I was getting paid during that time. It was a great benefit for me. Yes, I had to pay for my own trip, but it was my own trip. I didn't have to work, but I was still getting paid during that time. So you can see what I mean. There can be a lot of benefits if the family travels a lot. Just have to have the understanding before you start the job. Know if you're going to get paid while they go on vacation. There has been situations where parents would go on vacation and not pay their nanny. Definitely traveling can be a great benefit of being a nanny, live-in nanny. It's something to consider if you enjoy traveling and you want to have opportunities like this. The next pro, it's a pretty easy job. I mean, if you enjoy kids, that is. I always had a lot of fun with my kids, mainly though I worked with older kids. The youngest that I watched was age 3, but for the most part, I watched school-age kids. And of course, they were in school a lot, but when they were out of school, I really made the most of it, and I did all kinds of fun things with them. And another really neat thing was a lot of these families had annual passes to places, and they always made sure I had a pass. So we would go to all kinds of fun places during summer months or days off school. You know, we'd go to the zoo, we would go to the aquarium. I lived in California for 5 years. We would do a lot of days at the beach. There was so much swimming and pool time with all the families that I worked for as well. Definitely, if you enjoy working with kids, it is a fun job to have. Anyhow, those were the top pros with being a live-in nanny. Now I want to share the cons and all the negative things that I remember about being a live-in nanny. I just want to make you aware of it and know that it could be a possibility. It could be something to consider. It's not always the case, but it can be. Con number 1, the hours can be long. That is why you are a live-in nanny. At least I think that's why you're a live-in nanny. I believe that the whole idea of having a live-in nanny is that they know the hours are going to be longer, and they figured, you know, my nanny lives with us, so it's not like she needs to get home. She's getting paid by the hour. Most of the jobs are usually paid by the week. Some are paid by every 2 weeks. So it's not usually an hourly type job. A lot of the jobs you can have a set schedule, but I got to tell you, they can be pretty long hours. I know that a job I had for years, it was 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. And you think, wow, that's a long time to be at a job. Well, I'm not really at a job. I'm at home because I'm living with them. And then of course, I watched a lot of school-age kids too. So I did have the benefit of having the kids be at school a lot. That's a lot of free time for me. Really, it can be some long hours, and that is something that you have to consider compared to if you were going to a more of an hourly job, more of a 9 to 5 type of job. Another con is that it can be, at least I've had this happen to me, it can be hard to ask for time off. I told you about all the wonderful time off I had when they went on vacations, but sometimes I wanted to take my own trip, or something came up in my life where a bunch of my friends were going to go someplace and I wanted to join them. That meant I needed to ask for specific time off, not wait till they went on their vacation. It wasn't always easy to get the time off. The parents basically are going to have to find someone to fill in or take off themselves. And if they're not ready to take off, then sometimes the answer was no. And a lot of times it got difficult during the holidays. I worked for a Jewish family for many years, and I come from a Christian family. So I, of course, wanted to spend time with my family around Christmas time. Well, they didn't celebrate Christmas though, so they didn't really understand the fact that I needed to be off at least a couple days before Christmas, and I wanted a couple days after Christmas off. One year it was really hard to get that time off around the holidays because it was a really busy time of year for them with their jobs, and they didn't see the value in it. They figured, we'll give you Christmas Day off. That should be good enough, but I couldn't get the time off that I needed to. Well, I did eventually get the time off because I was able to find someone to fill in for me, but it still wasn't easy. Every time that I had an opportunity to go someplace, I was able to get the time off, but it was so hard to ask for it. So being a live-in nanny, I definitely found asking for my own time off was hard. And then to call in sick, that's a hard one too, because you're living there and you can't just call them up and say, hey, I'm sick. I mean, when I had like a fever, I would basically just slip them a note and say, look, I can't even get out of bed. They understood, and that was fine. But I mean, common cold or, just bad cramps, whatever. I could not call in sick. I had to just keep working because I was there. I couldn't really escape. And that's another thing. You just cannot get away as a live-in nanny. You have nowhere to go. At the end of the day, you might just be done with the family. You might just be done with being around the kids. True, you can have your own room and bathroom, maybe even own nanny apartment, but you still are in their home or on their property and you feel like you cannot get away. That can be a hard thing for a lot of people. I know when I first got into being a live-in nanny, a lot of people would ask, how do you live with another family? It was a good fit for me back in the day. I know it's not for everyone. That is something to consider too. I mean, do you feel comfortable living with another family? You are living with your employers, and that can be very awkward for people. I do have to say, you get used to it. It was always awkward when I first started living with a family, especially awkward being in the same house with my employers. But eventually, you just become part of the family and it's all good. So it wasn't always an issue for me, but there were some days when at the end of the day, I thought it would have been nice just to go to my own place, to escape. That is something that you have to keep in mind. You just cannot get away. I mean, you can always go stay somewhere else, go stay with a friend, or if your family lives nearby, go stay with them. But for the most part, you can't just drive home at the end of the day. You live there. Another con is dealing with difficult kids and the fact that you really can't discipline them. You are not the parent. You are merely the caretaker. A lot of the parents really don't discipline at all. Now, the disciplining that I had noticed from the parents that I worked with, it was very low key. It was very minimal, and I don't know how much of an effect it had on the kids. And as far as what the parents will let you do to discipline if the child is acting up, the parents really won't let you do a lot. A lot of times for the little kids, they'll just say, do timeout. The older kids just maybe take away something, take away dessert, or these days take away their phone. There are ways they let you discipline them because you have to at some point, right? But as a parent now, I discipline my kids so different than I did when I was a nanny. And of course, I am a lot more strict with my kids than I ever was with any kids that I babysat because I had that authority as being a parent now. It is difficult when you have a child that is acting up, that has bratty behavior. Sometimes these kids really needed some hardcore discipline, and it just didn't happen. That can be really frustrating. As a live-in nanny, as a nanny in general, that is something that you got to keep in mind. That can be really challenging with working with kids this way. And another negative can just be not seeing eye to eye with the parents, at some point just really not getting along with them. Again, comes down to it being awkward because you live there, you're living under the same roof, and you are just not seeing eye to eye with how they're raising their kids, but you know they are the parent and you're just their employee. Just having situations when it is awkward to be around the parents. Now, I gotta say, I was very blessed, got along great with all the families that I worked for. But I remember in some situations, I really felt a lot closer to the kids than I did with the parents. It wasn't bad. It just wasn't that we were close or anything like that. That's fine though, as long as we can still communicate with each other and we treat each other with respect. You know, it's fine. I don't have to be best friends with the parents, with my employers. There was some situations though that I had with past jobs where I actually got along better with the parents and then the kids were so difficult. So it's funny how it was opposite with certain jobs. But I think for the most part, if you want to get along great with anyone, you're going to want to get along great with the kids because that's who you're going to be spending the most time with, right? Final negative that I'm going to share, and this is the one that was presented to me when I was first inquiring about being a nanny, because I had asked that gal way back in the day, well, what's the hardest thing about being a nanny? Because she told me all the great things about it. But then she told me the hardest thing about doing it overall was that you feel like you have to be at their beck and call, at the beck and call of the parents, of your employers. You live with them. You know, sometimes you're going to have to work a Friday night. You're going to have to work longer hours just because most days, you know, they're going to be pretty typical. If you start at a certain time, you might not end at the same time. So that was things that I was aware of. There are times that they'll maybe ask you to babysit on a weekend. I don't know. Some jobs were different than others. Some, they actually asked me to babysit, like they were asking a babysitter and they would pay me extra. But I had other jobs where they would ask me to babysit on the weekends and they didn't pay me extra. And, you know, even though I watched a lot of school-age kids, I still always had to be available to those kids during the time they were in school. Just because the kids are in school day, don't think for a minute I felt relaxed to have an entire morning off. No, that was not always the case. Sometimes the kids would wake up sick. If I had anything going on that day, I had to basically drop it and stay home with the kids because that was the first priority. And that was another part of me being at the employer's beck and call. And that is something to consider. If the kids are in school, a lot of nannies will think it's a great opportunity for them to maybe take some college classes. And I actually did that at one point, but it always made me nervous that at least one child was going to be sick one morning when I had class and I would have to then miss my college class. It's just something you have to consider with being a live-in nanny, and you have to be there for the days that you thought you had that time off or the hours you thought you had off to care for the kids if need be. You know, there was a lot of random stuff that came up. I did find myself running a bunch of weird errands on random days. I never assumed I had a morning free. Sometimes I would wake up in the morning and the mom or dad would say, we need you to do this. One time it was my birthday. It was a weekday. It was my birthday. So I was thinking, I'm going to go out while the kids are at school and just do something fun. Well, it turns out that morning, my employers asked me to do a bunch of things that day. Yes, it was my birthday, but what could I do, right? It's just something that you have to expect. That is why I'm sharing what I learned from being a live-in nanny all those years and hopefully give you a better understanding of what to expect as well. Well, I'm going to go ahead and conclude this. You can see that being a live-in nanny has a lot of great things to offer, but at the same time, it's not perfect and there can be things that could be challenging. You just have to know what you're getting into before you start the job. Always go over everything. I know a lot of times these days, the families that hire nannies will actually have a written contract. To me, I look at that as an understanding of what the job includes and what the job expects you as the nanny to do. You just have to know what you're getting into before you start, and it could be a wonderful experience. I look back and I'm so glad I did it because it was a great experience. I am still in touch with a lot of the families that I nannied for. You really do become part of the family, especially with being a live-in nanny. I mean, there are some families that are not going to embrace you as much as others. That's just because every family is different. Anyhow, I do hope that this was helpful. I hope that it gave you a good understanding of what to expect. And if you have any questions, feel free to write them in the comments below. I'd be happy to answer any questions as best I can. If you enjoyed this video or got anything out of it, please hit the like button. Thank you so much for watching, and may you have a beautiful day.